if you are looking to gain talent onto your team, one awesome thing that can happen to grow your team is to be in front of people that might be able to align with your message and might want to be part of your team, even in this more competitive market.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, what's up, podcaster? It's Adam. And just yesterday, I was having a phone call, 90-minute coaching call with one of our clients who's launching a podcast, and she's remarkable. What she does is just incredible. She wants her podcast to really crush it as well, just like everything else that she's done. And she was asking me, what are some of the things that she can do to be able to grow her podcast? So as I sat there with her and just started throwing things off the top of my head, ooh, you can do this marketing thing. And I gave her a great idea. And then I broke it down and gave her the step-by-step how to do it. And then I was like, here's another thing you can do. What's your email list? She told me about her email list. She told me how big her email list, how many people are on there, how they joined the email list, how close or far away that they are with her podcast. And now we broke down the email list. We broke down all of these different things, many of which have already been shared on the show. And it's funny because at the end, toward the end of the conversation, it was a 90-minute call, and it might have been 75 minutes in. We might have had like 15 minutes left. And I just thought to myself, man, I forgot one of the most important things. And I came up with 2 ideas that could help her grow her podcast that are going to grow the exposure. And I think we shared one of them on this podcast already, but I'm going to bring it back up today because I don't want you to forget it. I don't want you to lose it. In the first 8 weeks of launching a podcast, now that means if you're about to launch a podcast, in the first 8 weeks, you're lucky because now you have the opportunity to be able to trigger some algorithms that you can't do after 8 weeks. And she is about to launch. So perfect for her to be able to talk a little bit about this one thing. Now, it'll grow your podcast at any stage, but being able to trigger the algorithms over the first 8 weeks is going to be monumental. It's going to be really, really helpful. So what is the thing? What are the 2 things that we discussed after that? First and foremost, it's getting booked on other people's podcasts. You can call this OPP, and you need to get down with it. You got to get down with OPP. Yeah, you know me. You got to get on other people's platforms, other people's podcasts. That means you will be able to be on their stage, their virtual stage. You'll be in front of their people. And if you hear me a little bit out of breath, by the way, I am on my treadmill. I'm on my office treadmill. So in our office, I've been working on cutting fat to hit my 6-pack, which by the time you hear this, I probably have hit it, but I'm in the last couple of days. And so that's why you probably hear me out of breath. Going back to getting booked on other people's podcasts, let's just talk about a few of the benefits, a few things that getting locked in and interviewed on OPP, what can that do for you? Generally speaking, it can blow up your listener base. The thing that I've shared a few times on this show is that when you're featured on anybody's podcast, every single one of their listeners does listen to podcasts. Every listener of that person's show listens to podcasts, and you're trying to grow your show. So this is one of the best ways to get in front of your perfect avatar, your listener. If you're about to launch a podcast, it can be hugely helpful to be able to time this to start getting on other people's shows so that when your show launches, the main call to action is check out my show. Wherever you listen to this podcast, just check out my show, and it's called, and then insert the name of your show. But what are some other advantages? What else can happen if you are interviewed on somebody else's show? You can get more deals with your clients. You can gain more clients. You can get in front of potential people that are going to buy your services or your product. Another thing, we'll call this number 2, really establish your expertise in a certain area and grow your authority in that field. Just my old partner, now we still own some real estate together, but he's mentioned before that, I think he says that it was his sister, I think, always used to say that expert is just a regular person who came in from out of town. It's funny because when you're interviewed on other people's shows, you gain some strange authority, even if you feel like you're a regular person from your town, right? If you, even like me, I feel like I'm just a guy. In fact, my team has asked me before, they're like, what should your title be? And I'm like, I'm just a guy. And they literally put that on our website because I really think I'm that special. I think I'm just a person. But because I'm able to speak on other people's podcasts, it gets me on other people's stages. I've been able to speak at some of the largest podcasting conferences around. And when I was doing more real estate stuff and really looking for deals, I was able to present in front of thousands and thousands of people at different conferences on stage. And it stemmed from having the podcast. So this is going to establish your expertise and your authority in your field. That was number 2. Number 3 is it's really niche networking. So what the takeaway is for that is you're connecting with the host of that other show where you're being interviewed, and it's networking with other people, but luckily it's within your little small niche and their niche. It's going to strengthen your credibility in many ways because you're connecting with those other people. You can also call them whenever you need help. You've got a question. They are people that are in your niche, and you've got them now in your network. You remember they say that your network is your net worth. So this is just an awesome way of fine-tuning and pinpointing those people that you want in your little circle. Number 4 is you can gain exposure. So you are able to get out in front of more people, get out in front of more podcast hosts, and start to allow this organic growth, like planting a seed. If you want something to grow, you've got to plant it. And you can gain this extra exposure by starting to nurture. You plant the seed, and it's so interesting how fast it happens. It's basically exponential. One apple seed can turn into an infinite amount of apple seeds over the course of the next 30 years. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. Multiplying, that one seed creates a whole tree. And even at one specific time, in one specific moment in time, there might be dozens and dozens or even hundreds of apples sitting right there that you can grab and eat. And that was just one seed from one of those apples 30 years ago. And it's interesting because each time one of those seeds gets planted, it has the potential to exponentially grow. So you're going to gain this exposure that basically snowballs on itself, whereas these other hosts think of you when somebody else is saying, who should I have on my show? These other hosts think of you when somebody asks them, who can do this one thing? And they're like, oh, I just interviewed someone who can do that thing perfectly. And additionally, the listener base of that person can think of you as well. So one interview can find a way to have a lot of people talking about you when you're not even in the room. This is one of the best ways to gain influence. And if you want more income, you should have more influence. So to gain that exposure, number 4 is a fantastic way, but just remember that it's also an exponential exposure. The next one is it'll allow you to be able to get more people on your team, to be able to recruit new talent on your team. For example, we all know that back in 2020, it was like so many people decided to quit their jobs, in part because they got all this money from the government and they didn't need to work, in part because they were like, I don't know what to do with my time. I'm going to start my own business. And some of their businesses did well. And in part because it created a new wave of people working from home. And the whole market became so competitive. It's interesting because most of the types of jobs that I'm aware of had a lack of staffing because the staff kept moving to other companies really, really quickly. So if you're looking to hire, if you are looking to gain talent onto your team, one awesome thing that can happen to grow your team is to be in front of people that might be able to align with your message and might want to be part of your team, even in this more competitive market. So that was number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is just gaining people on your team. Number 6 could be being able to purchase more things that you want to purchase. I call it acquisitions. I call it acquisitions because I used to do a lot of real estate. So from 2005, even now today, I still have hundreds of rentals with my partners. We have hundreds of units. Well, I love real estate. Every time that we wanted to buy a new property, we called it an acquisition. And one thing that I learned is by having my own podcast and by guesting on other people's podcasts, that credibility allowed me, that gain of credibility allowed me to get more acquisitions under our belt because some of the sellers said that they had heard us on our podcast or somebody else's podcast. So it allowed us to get more acquisitions, basically, regardless of raising private equity for those deals, regardless of the connection with other people that were massive in that industry. It allowed me to be able to have the credibility from sellers that they awarded us the deal in a few cases because of the exposure. And so if you're looking for more acquisitions, if you're looking to raise money, if you're looking to get more clients, this can all benefit you. The next one that I want to share is SEO. That just means search engine optimization. And here's the thing. It's all about backlinks. It's all about getting backlinks for your podcast. It's all about getting the most amount of people out there to be able to be sharing your website. And when you have these backlinks, your search engine optimization is increased. So by getting on other people's podcasts, on other people's stages, you get all the benefits we've already shared so far. But additionally, your podcast will organically grow because of these backlinks. And it's something called SEO. It's awesome. It's really, really cool. And you'll get more SEO for having your own podcast as well, because now your website keeps getting updated. And it's one of those things that, just like we talked about the exposure, gaining that exposure and having it will be a little bit more exponential. The SEO can grow that way organically when you're having other people on your show and you're being on their show. So it can be a huge benefit. And finally, you're not going to be limited to your own local geography. You're not going to be limited to only clients locally. So that can be a huge benefit for a lot of companies that are looking to grow, because now you're expanding that geographical boundary. You're expanding the awareness of your company and your services or your products. You're expanding that awareness in a very organic way and actually worldwide. Maybe you don't care if it's worldwide. I understand that. You're like, well, it doesn't matter. I only sell to people in my country, for example. Well, it's still badass that you're able to be in front of all these other people. My company, Grow Your Show, we do editing, marketing. We do a lot of work for other podcasters. One of the things is paid ads. When we do paid ads, we only focus on the countries that they want to be focused on. And the majority of our clients are living in the US, and they really only care if they have a United States listener base. That's the one that they are going to sell their products or services to. But what's interesting is we will only market there, but then they're all of a sudden they'll blow up in the US, but they'll also be heard in many other countries, and they'll be ranking. For example, some of our clients have ranked some of the top podcasts in Mexico, in Spain, in the Philippines, in Germany, there's so many, Ukraine, I'm trying to remember where else. The point being that we will market in the US, but then all of a sudden they're ranking in the top percentages in many other countries. Whenever we send a message to them, because we generally try to do a monthly update, every 4 to 6 weeks, they get a sheet of several pages where it shows all the screenshots and all the demographics and what's going on with the growth of their podcast. And in that, we often have to say something like, look, you're ranking in this other country, and that's awesome because we're not even marketing in that country. You got picked up because of natural algorithms. And this is just an example of how you can expand your own geographical boundary and get that awareness out. Quite large, but especially outside your city, but technically even outside the country for wherever you are. So there's some huge benefits, some huge reasons why you might want to get on other people's podcasts. So the call to action for you today, the thing that I'm going to ask you to do is find a way to get booked on other people's podcasts. Find a way. I'm going to give you a couple of resources. One of them is a very low cost way to do this, but with low cost means you've got a little bit of work to do. You've got some upfront effort that you got to put into this every week. And that is to go to PodMatch. Also, Podbooker could be helpful. PodMatch, my friend, Alex Sanfilippo, runs the company. And I don't remember the price. We pay it. I just don't have it in front of me. It might be like $20 a month or something like that, that you pay to be part of this network. And then people start looking for guests, and you'll get email pings. I get a lot of them through that service. And people will say, hey, I want you on my podcast, or vice versa. They'll say, hey, can I come on your podcast? So for a very small amount of money, like $20, you get that. Also, what's cool that Alex is doing is if you have one of the other people that are looking to be on a podcast, you can monetize your show. So you can offload that cost of whatever I said, maybe $20 a month or so. You can actually start making a tiny bit of money by having them on your show. But this is a great way for you to find other podcasters. You can do a reciprocal interview where you get booked on their show and they come on yours. You can only be a guest, and you could pay a little bit more to really get your message out and get in front of the most amount of people. And you could also find more guests for your podcast. So it's kind of cool. And the other resource that I'll mention on top of PodMatch is Interview Valet. Interview Valet is much more expensive. I mean, I'm not trying to steer you away from it at all. I think they do a fantastic job, honestly. I've mentioned Tom Schwab on the podcast a few other times as well. He is the one who runs Interview Valet. And don't quote me, and the price could change, but it's something like, give or take, around $500 per episode that you want to be on. But you don't just do one podcast. His team will make sure that you can get booked on many other podcasts. And so generally what it might look like is you might give them, like, for example, somewhere around $5,000 to get on something like 10 podcasts. Or it might be like 25,000 to get on something like 50 or 60 podcasts. So the price could change, and maybe I was quoting it slightly off, but just be prepared to spend around that amount of money, like $5,000 to get on 10-ish podcasts if you're going to work with a team like that. Tom, I've met him in person at a conference that he was a sponsor and I was a sponsor as well. Our booths were just around the corner from each other. Man, he's just a good guy, and I like what his company does. There are other companies that do this, but I don't like them anywhere close to that. I feel like some of them are really focused on the money that they'll make versus the value that they'll give to their client. And so if you are going to become a client to one of these companies, Interview Valet is a great one. And we are affiliates because I like them so much. So I'll make sure a link to connect with Tom is in there, and please let him know that we mentioned it. So if you're ready to kind of grow your exposure, get all these benefits, hack into other people's networks, get down with OPP, gain more clients, more authority, more networking, more exposure, more teammates in this competitive market, get more acquisitions for your company and increase your SEO, take the next step. Appreciate you listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. You're not alone if you're ready to either get your very first affordable microphone or if you're ready to upgrade your equipment to some legit podcasting studio equipment. Because on all of the forums over the last few months, I'm seeing this all the time. Even my own personal clients that work with my team, they're ready to get that next microphone. They're asking us for it. Additionally, when I'm on discovery calls with potential clients, they're always asking for this stuff. Hey, what mic do you recommend? Hey, what lighting do you recommend? What webcam should I be using? So many questions. And so what we did, my whole team has put together a PDF so that if you're one of those people who is looking to either get your very first affordable microphone, or if you're ready to upgrade your equipment to more professional podcast studio equipment, whether it's soundproofing or whatever, we've got you covered by going to growyourshow.com/PDF. And you can download the PDF for free, or right there on the webpage is everything that you would have, and you don't need to download the PDF. Either way, just go to growyourshow.com/PDF, which will put you to the podcasting equipment that me and my team have personally vetted. I'll see you on the next episode.